Elvis Presley was not just a music icon. He was a cultural phenomenon who transcended generations. Since his meteoric rise in the 1950s, he had been under the global spotlight, amassing a fan base so devoted that many saw him almost as an immortal entity. But beyond the stage lights and unforgettable hits, there are stories that go beyond music. Official records, testimonies, and curious events raise an intriguing question. To what extent was Elvis involved with American authorities? In 1970, an unexpected meeting between Elvis and then-President Richard Nixon paved the way for one of the most enduring theories about the singer. The meeting, documented in photographs and official records, was not just a symbolic moment. On the contrary, some believe that a much deeper agreement was made that day. Elvis was not just a musician. He might have been a man with secret connections within the United States government. But what exactly did he know, and how far did his ties with American intelligence agencies go? Welcome to another night where mysteries never sleep. I'm Midnight, and this is 7 Nights. Before we begin, I'd like to ask for your support. Like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. It's just one click, but it makes a huge difference in helping YouTube share these videos with more people and allowing me to keep bringing you this content. I'm counting on you. Now, let's get into the video. December 21st, 1970. One of the most famous men on the planet walks through the corridors of the White House. Dressed in a purple velvet suit, dark sunglasses, and a gold belt, he carries a handwritten letter. His destination? The Oval Office. The recipient? The President of the United States, Richard Nixon. But what was a rock star doing there? The answer is even stranger than it seems. Elvis Presley was not there to ask for favors or talk about music. He wanted something very specific, a badge from the Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs. The meeting lasted about half an hour. Official documents show that Elvis offered to help the U.S. government fight drugs and counterculture. He claimed that the Beatles and hippie movements were corrupting the youth and that, as a true patriot, he wanted to help the country. Nixon, surprised and apparently charmed by the idea, granted his request. That same afternoon, Elvis received the badge he so desired. But this story is much bigger than just a curious meeting between a singer and a president. What really happened that day? The connection between Elvis Presley and the U.S. government did not begin or end with this meeting. FBI files reveal that he had interacted with federal authorities before, and the volume of documents about him is astonishing. Why did the government keep so many records on a music star? More than that, why are some parts of these files still censored? Elvis was not just a singer. He moved among powerful figures, maintained close relationships with law enforcement officials, politicians, and high-ranking members of national security. Moreover, he had access to information that would normally be far beyond the reach of any celebrity. To many, he was merely a collector of badges and someone fascinated by law enforcement. But is that the whole truth? Or was there something deeper behind this obsession? Another strange detail: Elvis frequently traveled to different countries, and during some of these trips, he met with foreign authorities without the press knowing. The government monitored his movements, and records indicate that he had unusual privileges for an artist. What was he doing on these trips? Was he simply exploring new cultures, or was there something more to these private meetings? It is not just Elvis's relationship with the FBI that raises questions. The way he positioned himself publicly also sparks suspicions. He condemned the use of illegal drugs and saw counterculture as a threat to American values. However, he himself was a constant user of prescription drugs. Was this contradiction merely a personal habit, or was it part of something much bigger? After the meeting with Nixon, Elvis further strengthened his relationship with law enforcement figures. He was photographed alongside police chiefs, received exclusive privileges, and moved in circles where his presence would not make sense for just a singer. Why was he treated so specially? Some conspiracy theorists believe that Elvis may have acted as a government informant, someone who, due to his fame, had access to valuable information about the music industry and even organized crime. But is there any concrete proof of this? FBI documents never explicitly confirmed that Elvis worked for the government, but some excerpts raise suspicions. Parts of the files remain censored, and some information appears to have been removed. What exactly was erased? His death in 1977 only added more mystery to this story. When classified documents about Elvis started to be released decades later, some excerpts remained hidden. If he were just a singer, Why are these records still classified? And more importantly, what do these files hide? Whether Elvis actually collaborated with the government or was simply an influential man fascinated by authority, no one can say for sure. But the facts are too strange to ignore. What really happened behind the scenes of his life? What else does the government know that it doesn't want the public to find out? Elvis Presley always carried an aura of grandeur, but there are aspects of his life that remain in the shadows. One of them involves his relationship with law enforcement, and more specifically, with investigations into organized crime. What few people know is that the King of Rock not only admired the world of law enforcement, but may have been directly involved in activities far beyond music. Was he just a fan of police badges, or was he actively helping the government in secret operations? Over the years, Elvis cultivated powerful friendships within law enforcement. He was invited to exclusive events, had access to restricted information, and, most intriguingly, received special authorizations to carry weapons and move freely through areas controlled by authorities. But why would a celebrity have such privileges? And more importantly, why did high-ranking police officers trust him so much? Reports indicate that Elvis displayed an unusual interest in fighting drug trafficking. His obsession with capturing criminals went beyond what one would expect from a singer. He insisted on presenting himself as a defender of law and order, claiming he wanted to help authorities dismantle criminal networks that were infiltrating the entertainment industry. But what was the real motive behind this involvement? During the period when he was closest to the government, Elvis may have used his fame to move in circles that would normally be inaccessible to investigators. The worlds of music, film, and entertainment in general have always been surrounded by suspicious figures, from unscrupulous businessmen to drug traffickers handling millions. Elvis was one of the few who could navigate these groups freely without raising suspicion. Does this mean he was gathering intelligence for the authorities? Some reports suggest that he provided names and details about individuals linked to drug trafficking. If true, this would explain why he received such special treatment from law enforcement agencies. But if Elvis was indeed helping the government, this would also put him in an extremely dangerous position. What if the targets of his reports discovered that he was not just a singer, but also an informant? The strangest part is that while Elvis claimed to hate drug trafficking and positioned himself against it, he was also known for his excessive use of prescription drugs. This may seem like a contradiction, but some believe that this behavior was actually a way to cover up his real mission. Maintaining the image of someone fighting against drugs while being surrounded by them could have been the perfect camouflage. But does this theory hold up? The FBI kept extensive records on him, and some parts of these documents indicate that his relationship with the government went beyond what was officially disclosed. But how deep did this connection really go? Why do so many records remain classified? Another strange point is that, in the last years of his life, Elvis seemed increasingly paranoid. He heightened security around him, limited his public appearances, and showed signs of fear. Was this just a reflection of his emotional decline, or was there something real behind this fear? There are rumors that Elvis received threats, and some of them may have come from the very people he tried to expose. If he was truly involved in secret investigations, it is plausible that he made powerful enemies. Could his sudden change in behavior have been a sign that he knew he was in danger? Elvis's death in 1977 raises even more questions. Officially, he died due to health complications related to drug use. But for some, this version was never convincing. If he was collaborating with authorities while simultaneously dealing with dangerous criminals, could he have been silenced? Or, as some theories suggest, was he placed under protection and forced to disappear? The classified files may hold the answers to these questions. But until those documents are fully revealed, the story of Elvis Presley remains shrouded in mystery. Was he just a fan of law enforcement, or was he directly involved in secret operations against organized crime? Throughout his career, Elvis Presley took numerous international trips, but some of them raise more questions than admiration. For a rock star, it was natural to tour the world, visit new countries, and perform for massive audiences. However, certain trips did not seem to be related to tours or professional commitments. In some cases, his visits went unnoticed by the public, and in others, he gained access to people and places that an ordinary musician would hardly be able to reach. What exactly was happening behind the scenes? One of the most enigmatic trips occurred in 1958, when Elvis was sent to West Germany to serve in the U.S. Army. Officially, he was just another recruit, serving like any other soldier. But there are details that make this story seem a bit different. He was not treated like a common military member. He had privileges that other soldiers did not, including a private residence outside the base and a lifestyle that hardly resembled that of a young man in military service. Additionally, he maintained contact with high-ranking officers and political figures of the time. But why? At that time, the Cold War was at its peak. The United States and the Soviet Union were vying for influence in every aspect, and culture was a powerful weapon in this conflict. Rock and roll, fashion, and Western freedom of expression were seen as tools to undermine Soviet control over European youth. And who better to represent this ideal than Elvis Presley? Could it be that his presence in Germany had a purpose beyond military service? Beyond Europe, Elvis also made private visits to countries like Mexico and Japan, but little is known about the real reason behind some of these trips. Some took place without any official announcement, and to this day, there are no clear records of what he did in those places. For someone whose life was constantly monitored by the media, it is strange that certain periods remain unexplained. Why was he able to travel without drawing attention? Another intriguing fact is that Elvis had access that far exceeded that of a mere artist. At various points in his life, he secured private audiences with presidents, senators, police chiefs, and even members of American intelligence. Normally, a singer would have to go through various bureaucratic hurdles to reach figures of that caliber. In Elvis's case, those doors seemed to open effortlessly. Was he just an influential man, or was there something more behind it? During his career, he was also seen in private meetings with high-ranking figures from the FBI and CIA. While many believe these were just casual conversations, others wonder, why would a singer have such a keen interest in engaging with intelligence agencies? And more importantly, why were these meetings not widely publicized at the time? The secrecy surrounding these interactions raises suspicions. On multiple occasions, FBI documents recorded Elvis's movements without specifying the purpose of his travels. Some pages of these files were censored before being released to the public, leaving gaps that have never been filled. If there was nothing significant about these trips, why are certain details still hidden? Another point that reinforces theories about his possible involvement with the government is the fact that he always showed a fascination with national security issues. He did not just collect police badges, he also studied surveillance strategies and crime-fighting tactics. On some occasions, he mentioned that he had knowledge of classified information that could shock the world. What did he really know? Elvis's connections with politicians and military officials also draw attention. Some of his friendships were with individuals deeply involved in American geopolitics, people who would hardly maintain such close relationships with a mere singer. Did he simply enjoy being surrounded by influential figures, or did he actually play a more active role in these relationships? Another factor fueling conspiracies is the ease with which he obtained authorization to carry weapons, even in restricted areas. He was allowed to carry firearms on several occasions and, in some states, received special permits without going through the usual procedures. Such treatment was rare, even for some authorities. How did he manage to secure these privileges? Whether in the United States or during his international travels, the truth is that Elvis had privileges that were far from normal. His interactions with the government were more frequent than most imagined, and many of them remain shrouded in mystery. What was really happening behind closed doors? Was he simply using his influence to satisfy his curiosity, or was he part of something much bigger than anyone ever imagined? August 16, 1977. The world receives the shocking news. Elvis Presley has been found dead at his mansion, Graceland. The official cause? A heart attack, supposedly triggered by excessive use of prescription drugs. But something didn't seem right. From the very beginning, there were inconsistencies in the reports, details that didn't add up, and questions that were never fully answered. Could it be that Elvis didn't actually die that night? Could his death have been staged to cover up something much bigger? The first thing that stands out is the conflicting accounts about the condition of his body. Some witnesses claim that Elvis looked very different when he was found. Some even said the corpse appeared bloated, almost unrecognizable, raising suspicions that it might not have been him. Additionally, official documents indicate that the autopsy was shrouded in secrecy. Parts of the report were kept classified, and even today, some files remain inaccessible. Why? Another strange fact. The day after his death was announced, a mysterious man purchased a one-way ticket to Buenos Aires, using the name John Burroughs, one of the pseudonyms Elvis frequently used in hotels. Just a coincidence, or evidence that he had escaped to live under a new identity. Graceland, his Memphis residence, became a pilgrimage site for fans. But one detail has always sparked suspicion: his tomb. The name engraved on the headstone reads Elvis Aaron Presley, but his middle name was officially spelled with only one A, Aaron. Would such a glaring mistake be acceptable to the Presley family? Or was it intentional, a secret message that he was never really buried there? Another curious point involves the speed at which the funeral was arranged. Just 2 days after his death was announced, Elvis was already buried. The custom-made coffin was so heavy that some witnesses believed there was no body inside, but rather a cooled wax figure meant to simulate a corpse. Could the funeral have been staged to divert attention? Over the years, countless people have claimed to have seen Elvis alive in different parts of the world. From casinos in Las Vegas to small rural towns in the United States, the reports are endless. Some can be easily dismissed as fan obsession, but others are strangely detailed. Some witnesses claim he lived in seclusion, protected by the government, possibly as part of a witness protection program. And it's worth asking, if Elvis was indeed involved in government operations, could he have been at risk for something he knew? Could he have been silenced, or worse, forced to disappear to avoid an even darker fate? The theory that Elvis faked his own death gained even more traction when certain FBI documents were partially released. Some pages suggest that he may have been collaborating in investigations involving powerful figures. If that's true, was he forced into hiding? Or was he eliminated to ensure compromising secrets never came to light? Over the decades, just when it seemed like the story was finally fading, new details emerged. In 1988, a woman claimed to have spoken with a man identical to Elvis in Kalamazoo, Michigan. In 1994, a photograph taken at Graceland showed a mysterious man sitting in the garden, wearing sunglasses and a white beard, staring directly at the camera. Experts analyzed the image and concluded that there was an eerie resemblance to what Elvis would look like if he were alive and aged. Was it just a trick of perception, or was it a clue left behind on purpose? What really happened on August 16, 1977? Did Elvis truly die that day, a victim of his deteriorating health, or was he removed from the spotlight to ensure his survival? If he had to disappear, what was the real reason? And if he were still alive, where would he be now? What may seem like just a detail in Elvis Presley's career could, in fact, hide something much bigger. While the world witnessed the rise of rock and roll and the meteoric success of the King of Rock, another conflict was unfolding behind the scenes: the Cold War. The United States and the Soviet Union were engaged in an ideological battle that went far beyond nuclear weapons and the space race. Culture was one of the main fronts in this confrontation, and Western music became a powerful tool for influencing the youth of communist countries. But what if Elvis was not just a symbol of this movement? What if he had a more active role than anyone ever imagined? Elvis's presence in the media was not just a musical phenomenon. It was a representation of the American way of life: freedom, rebellion, and individuality. The US government quickly recognized the potential of this. If Hollywood and television were already being used to project the image of the American dream, why couldn't music be used the same way? Rock and roll was banned in many Soviet-influenced countries, considered a genre that encouraged moral decay. But ironically, the more authorities tried to suppress it, the more young people were drawn to it. And it was in this context that Elvis became a strategic asset. His military enlistment, for example, was framed as an act of patriotism. While many artists sought to avoid military service, Elvis was sent to West Germany in 1958. Officially, he was fulfilling his duty like any other citizen. But something about this doesn't quite add up. Why would the biggest star in the world need to be exposed this way? Was it merely a public relations move, or was there a greater purpose behind this decision? Elvis's presence in Germany placed him at the very heart of the East-West conflict. American soldiers listened to his music, and German youth began to imitate him, even under the watchful eyes of the authorities. Gradually, his influence crossed borders and reached regions where rock was prohibited. The impact was so significant that, years later, CIA documents mentioned the importance of American culture in destabilizing communist thought. But what if Elvis was not just a passive symbol in this strategy? During his time in Germany, he had access to high-ranking officers, held private meetings, and on several occasions, disappeared for periods without any public records of his whereabouts. Where did he go? Who were the people he was meeting? The theory that Elvis may have worked directly for the government gains more credibility when analyzing his meetings with political and security figures throughout his life. He not only met with Nixon in 1970, but also maintained contact with other key figures in American politics. What was the real nature of these connections? Another intriguing point. While Elvis served in the army, his image was carefully reshaped. He transformed from a rebellious young man, who initially frightened conservatives with his dance moves, into a disciplined and patriotic role model. This transformation was no coincidence. It happened at the exact moment when the U.S. needed to reinforce its influence over young people, demonstrating that American culture was something to be admired and followed. Some researchers suggest that this image shift was not spontaneous. Elvis may have been advised to soften his public persona to make him more acceptable to different audiences. But who was behind this decision? Was it just a marketing strategy or a coordinated effort to turn him into an unofficial ambassador of American values? Additionally, records indicate that the FBI was monitoring Elvis, not because he was suspected of wrongdoing, but due to the societal impact of his music and lifestyle. If the government saw culture as a geopolitical weapon, was Elvis just a pawn in this game, or was he aware of what was happening? The fact remains that Elvis Presley's influence went far beyond music. He helped transform rock into a global phenomenon, but his close ties with the government and his role in shaping American identity during the Cold War still raise many questions. Did he merely live at the center of events, or was he an active participant in a larger strategy? If Elvis truly played a role behind the scenes of this conflict, that information would never be officially disclosed. But the connections, secret meetings, and carefully managed changes in his image lead to an inevitable question. How deep was the King of Rock's involvement with the U.S. government? For years, the FBI maintained an extensive dossier on Elvis Presley. Part of these documents was released to the public, revealing curious details about his relationship with the government and his concerns about certain groups' influence on American society. However, many pages remain censored, raising a disturbing question. What is the United States government still hiding about the King of Rock? The available records show that Elvis was considered influential enough to be monitored. But the real question is not why the FBI collected information on him. It's what in those documents was deemed so sensitive that it had to be hidden. Some of the redacted portions include names, dates, and locations that could reveal connections the public was never meant to know. Elvis's relationship with authorities was, at the very least, unusual. He had free access to high-ranking figures, received privileges rarely granted to civilians, and held private meetings with law enforcement agents and politicians. At times, his proximity to national security seemed to be more than just an admiration for badges and weapons. If he was just a singer, why were so many doors open for him? One striking detail in the FBI files is the indication that Elvis was concerned about suspicious activities within the entertainment industry. He believed certain groups were using music and film to spread ideologies contrary to the U.S. government. This concern might explain why he got so close to authorities. But was he merely reporting what he saw, or was he directly involved in secret investigations? Another suspicious element is the ongoing secrecy surrounding some information related to his death. Decades have passed, yet parts of the official documents remain inaccessible. If his death was simply due to health complications, as widely reported, why are some parts of the investigation still classified? Many believe that the truth about Elvis was buried along with him. But with each new revelation, more doubts arise. The speed of his funeral arrangements, the contradictions in reports about his death, and the persistent theories that he might have entered a witness protection program only fuel the mystery. Theories that Elvis was a government collaborator gain even more credibility when looking at the pattern of secrecy surrounding his name. Other public figures monitored by the FBI had their files fully released after a certain period, but in Elvis's case, some information remains blocked. What was so sensitive about his relationship with the authorities? If he truly worked as an informant or was involved in secret operations, that information would never be officially confirmed. But the indirect evidence points to something beyond a simple obsession with badges and law enforcement. Some theories suggest that Elvis may have been used as a piece in a larger game, Someone who, due to his popularity, had access to valuable information and could influence millions of people without anyone suspecting a thing. But was he aware of this? Did he willingly accept this role, or was he manipulated over the years? Even decades after his death, the interest in what really happened to Elvis Presley has not faded. With every newly released document, new questions arise. And as long as parts of this story remain classified, there will always be room for speculation. What is still hidden in the FBI's files? What secret does the government not want the public to uncover? And more importantly, was Elvis Presley just an extraordinary musician, or was he a man who knew too much? Elvis Presley was far more than just a music icon. His journey intertwined with powerful figures, secret meetings, and privileges that extended beyond the reach of any other artist. Throughout his life, he moved through spheres few dared to enter, cultivating relationships with the government, American intelligence, and even the highest ranks of law enforcement. What seemed to be just an obsession with badges may have actually been a reflection of something much greater, something that was never fully revealed to the public. The death of the King of Rock did not silence the mysteries surrounding him. On the contrary, the questions only multiplied. Classified documents, contradictory accounts, and a web of events that defy logical explanations raise an inevitable suspicion. Did Elvis Presley know something he wasn't supposed to? Was his influence used for something beyond music? And if the truth were to come to light, what would it mean for the history we know? This story is just one piece of the puzzle, and one day, you might see the whole picture. If this made you think, subscribe, like the video. It helps the channel grow. Don't forget to share, because more voices mean more discoveries.